The opinions expressed in this video are that of the poster. If you disagree, I'm happy to have a civil conversation. If you want to turn it into hostility, arrogance, egotistical nonsense, you will be ignored and perhaps blocked if possible. Now we got that disclaimer out of the way, let's get on with the video. So now that we got that out of the way, let's just get on with the video. This is my third video on Whisperknife. I have posted two others, one being Whisperknife The Basics and one being Whisperknife Vengeance's Pursuit. Now, given the fact that there's been a few nerfs and stuff, there's a possibility of changing, at the very least, advantageous position for dagger threat. I'm still working on whether I want to do that or not. You can stick to the original video, or you can make a few changes because of some of these module nerfs. There's a whole new module coming out with gear and stuff, and there's a lot of testing to be done for future builds. But for the purposes of this video, none of that stuff matters either. But where I want to start is I want to give a little respect where due. Even though I don't agree with the vast majority of these video posters out there, I don't want to mention names. I mean, you know who they are. I don't need to mention names. I do want to give them a little bit of respect when they deserve it. And one thing that came up in discussion was one of the reasons that I maintain stealth and put through all my rotations in stealth is that originally I believed that Ambusher's Haste was affecting your mounts and your arties and your dailies, all that stuff. Now, I'm going to give them the respect they deserve and say that they're telling me it doesn't. I'm not the guy who's going to over math test everything, so I have to give them the respect and believe them that is in fact the case. That your mount and your arties are not affected by Ambusher's Haste. And that's cool. However, that does not change anything in my rotation. The principles of my rotation are still exactly the same. It's just that instead of my extra damage coming from Ambusher's Haste, it comes from the combat advantage. But the principles are exactly the same. Now, like I say, I don't do enough testing to verify what those guys are saying, but I believe that they do enough testing that they're probably right. However, their argument about entering stealth does not give you extra damage is also somewhat wrong. So there's two trains of thought here. Their train of thought is, well, if both of you are behind the boss, you're in stealth and you're not in stealth, the damage is going to be exactly the same when you apply a mount or you apply an arty. We're speaking about those skills in particular. And it's not a wrong argument. It's just a flawed argument because they assume everybody's in combat position. And that's the flaw with that argument. I don't base my rotations and my skills and all that stuff on a vacuum of everything is going to be perfect and you're all going to be in combat position. And we'll get into that in math and game theory later on in the video. But when I do my rotations, I do them from a perspective of I may not be in combat advantage position. And therefore, my argument is also right in that my entering stealth grants me combat advantage position and gives me more damage. And that's the point. That is the main point that I was discussing as far as why I want to enter stealth to do my rotations. I'll get into how we got into this argument in the first place next. But the first thing I want to show here is how it affects. How being stealth can affect your mount and your arties. So this is a Bigby test where you go to the boss in the training room and you basically apply Bigby with no buffs, no extra stuff. I'm not feeding food or whatever. I'm trying to keep it as bare bones simple as possible, okay? Bare bones. And I did 17 hits, both stealth and non-stealth, and you can see the results. So of course, entering stealth will affect the damage. Even if it's only combat advantage, and that's fine. It doesn't matter. It doesn't change anything for me. That the damage is purely combat advantage. And yes, for their argument, they're right too, assuming that Ambusher's Haste is not affecting these, that it's purely a combat advantage. But you can clearly see that the non-stealth is far, far worse. It's doing 954k on at most of the time, and then it has a few outliers. And the stealth is doing 2.43 million most of the time. So it's clear and obvious that even if it's just for combat advantage position, you're still gaining a benefit of damage by being in stealth for someone who is not always at the back of the boss. And that's the point of this particular argument, that the world is not so simple that you can just make a perfect mathematical DPS rotation and assume that everybody's in a vacuum and everything is going to work out perfectly. It just doesn't work that way. And that's the point that I want to bring up as far as this goes. Now, how exactly did we get into this argument in the first place? That's what we'll get to next. All right, so how exactly did we get into this predicament in the first place? Well, I went on to YouTube. Curiosity killed the cat. I went and watched one of these, or started to watch one of these Whisperknife max damage build videos. And I basically got about 30 seconds in, and I'm like, are you nuts? What the hell are you doing? And I stopped. I couldn't watch it anymore. Because he basically says in a full rotation, you go SS, Shadow Strike, and then you do Lashing. You put Lashing as your second skill. And I'm just like, are you nuts? Using Lashing as a second skill? Now keep in mind, at the time I was under the idea that Ambusher's Haste is affecting mounts and arties in particular. And I have since backed down on that. I give them the benefit of the doubt. So, of course, I've relaxed a little at this point on their concept of rotation because they were starting from a different base than I was. But at the end of the day, I still don't agree. Even after coming to that realization, I still do not agree of using Lashing Blade at all. But if you're going to use it, I do not agree with using it as a second hit. I think that that is nonsense. Again, it's based on my principles of math and game theory, all that stuff. We'll get into some of that later. But it's still, I can't agree with what they're doing. Now, Lashing, in my opinion, is a horrid WK skill. It takes the whole concept of range and flexibility out. It forces you to sit behind the back of the boss or be behind the back of the boss all the time. And not every fight can you do that, really. Because Lashing will take you out of stealth. So yes, you can still go SS and Lashing and do it from a non-CA position. But as soon as you hit Lashing, now you got to be in a CA position. So I still don't agree with using Lashing myself as a hit. And I understand there are other skills out there. I mean, my third skill, again, I know all the math DPSer types are going to like have a pissy fit because I like Blitz, but you can watch my first video and you can see why I like Blitz. But again, the point is that using Lashing second is a silly concept. And I realize that it probably works for them because they play the class an entirely different way, and that's cool. But that's the real argument for me is based on stealth. Lashing taking you out of stealth would, if I were to put Lashing second, my whole rotation would go to crap. Because again, I don't guarantee that when I design a rotation, I'm designing it about minimum repercussions. I'm designing it where very little can go wrong to make this rotation go wrong. Anytime that these guys use their quote-unquote max mass build, if for whatever reason they're out of combat position, it goes to shits. I don't have to worry about that necessarily. Yes, I'm still going to be in combat position when I can do it and when it's possible, because there are advantages to doing that. But there's no I must be in combat advantage position because I do all my stuff within the stealth window as much as humanly possible. So, like I say here, if you've read this, I've relaxed a little bit on from my original position of "Are you fucking kidding me?" to it's still not really something that I would do, and I still believe avidly that you should do as much damage as you can within the stealth window. And you ask yourself why. So we're going to get into that one next. So the question then is, if mathematically speaking, you can show that being in stealth and not being stealth does not make a difference, why care? And the answer to me is, you're wrong in two different levels. It always makes a difference. Now, one reason is mathematically. If in fact you're using your counters and you have ambusher's haste, then there's a mathematical difference. But the other reason is through game theory, which is to say you gain a positional advantage by being in stealth. Those that go with these max DPS builds, they only believe in the vacuum of math theory. That, well, at least that's what they appear anyway to believe. I can't speak for them right now, but when they're talking, they're all about, you know, I'm in a vacuum in a perfect world. Everything is going to be done exactly right, and tell me what rotational max thing will give me the best output. Okay, they only analyze mathematically, but they don't think about how to apply it in a game. There's like the study of the math of it, and then there's the study of the game of it, and they seem to only live in one world. Now, in that math world, if you are in CA position all the time, then yes, that rotation they come up with, Shadow Strike, Lashing, I'm sure that works fantastic. I'm sure it's beautiful and it does great damage. Don't necessarily think it does way more than my rotation. I'm not going to say one way or another. If it does or doesn't, but we'll find out one day for sure. Now, I'm going to bring the game theory into this, which is to say this. To try and base your rotations on some perfect vacuum math world and come up with the most outstanding damage rotation, while nice in theory, it doesn't work in practice. It may help you get somewhere down the road by learning that and then adjusting, but if you're going to stick to that whole math theory and apply your rotations consistently with the idea that the math theory is going to win over, then I'm going to tell you that you're wrong. Now, I'm going to give the respect where respect is due. Again, these guys, they do a lot of testing and stuff, and I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and say that their rotation executed optimally will do a little bit more than my rotation, and especially since I do use a blitz skill, but then they use what is impact shot, which blitz impact shots, probably impact shot. Again, math guys will probably, answer, oh, well, impact shot is so much stronger. And I'll be like, yeah, whatever. You keep doing your math and I'll keep doing my thing. Okay. But I'm going to give them respect and say that their rotation, let's say it is a little bit stronger if executed perfectly. Okay. Applying game theory here, I'm going to say, well, that's great, but I don't have to apply my rotation in the same way you do. I have way more flexibility in my rotation. I can do a lot more things because I don't have to be behind the boss to execute my rotation. If I can get behind the boss and all works, of course you're going to go behind the boss because there are some advantages to return to shadows and some of these other things where being behind the boss will give you that advantage. And of course, if you are in between stealth, having combat advantage is nice as well. That's one of the reasons I used to use advantageous position is it allowed me to maintain combat advantage, and I never, ever, ever had to be behind the boss. I didn't ever have to be behind the boss in those days. They've gone and nerfed advantageous position to 2 seconds, and I'm not really sure anymore. I'm still dagger threat or advantageous position. I'm messing around with it. We'll figure it out. But now that we're in a new module and advantageous position has been nerfed, yes, I'm going to have to find some time to be behind the boss. But the one thing I don't have to worry about is when I execute a full burst rotation, I can do it from any spot on the floor and get pretty much maximum damage out of it because all my stuff is done in stealth. I don't use a lashing so early on in my rotation to take me out of stealth that I have to find the back of the boss, okay? So I am less prone to error in a full rotation than these guys are. Now, they're perfect. They don't make mistakes. They live in a vacuum world. So I don't know what to say about that, really. But the reality is that we all will fail our rotations now in a while. Now and then, we're all going to fail our burst rotations. I do it. I'm not perfect. And that's exactly why I choose to do the rotations I do, is that I don't have to be perfect. And if for any reason I'm not in combat position, I can still execute a full burst. It doesn't matter. And yes, in the case of, the mount and the arty, again, being behind the boss doesn't give you any more damage. I don't disagree with that statement. But if you're not behind the boss, it does. Simple. Like, these guys can't get through what I'm trying to say. They're all about the whole, but you are. But no, you're not always. So I don't know what to say in regard to that, really. I mean, you stick by your view and I'll stick by mine. Now, do my rotations fail now and then? Of course they do, as I've already said. Perhaps my rotation fails because I can't regenerate my stealth fast enough before an arty call happens. It happens, so it's rare. It's more likely that you're going to be out of combat advantage position than I'm going to not be able to get into stealth for a full rotation. Let's put it that way. And then the other thing is, if I can't get into stealth for a full burst, it won't be very long before I am in stealth because I have fast stealth regeneration. So even if it takes 1 second extra, I can still execute a full burst rotation and do it within stealth. No problem. Okay? But you guys who live on the math world have big issues if for whatever reason you cannot get into combat advantage position and you are using that rotation of SS followed by lashing. You're going to have some serious problems. Like massive problems. Okay? And that is the whole idea of the game theory, is that life does not revolve around doing math and living in a vacuum. That is where I'm coming from and where my rotations come from. It's not only just math, but it's game. Now, as a math theorist, you're going to argue, well, how often am I ever really out of CA position? And I'm going to say pretty much every fight all the time. Let's look at a typical one. I'm going to show you MLMD second boss, okay? As an MLMD second boss, I know you guys are going to say, well, that's a silly example because, I mean, if you have a good tank, he's just going to go to the edge, turn the guy around, and you're always going to be behind the boss, chop, chop, chop. Everything's going to be great. And you're true. It's true. That's right. That's an argument to be made. And that shows your side of the equation, that you can execute your rotation very simply and that the tank did a great job, whatever. But the problem with that argument is that the MLMD second boss is not about the boss. It's about the summoners. And how many times have you run that boss where the summoners are hanging on the edge and you can't get behind them? And you're stuck. Now you're stuck because you can't get combat advantage on the summoners. Now, of course, you say, well, I'm super elite and I can one-shot a summoner or whatever. Okay. Most people don't live in that world of imagination, okay? And it's not just that they're hanging at the edge sometimes. Sometimes they get ported. Like they drop off the edge and they get ported. What are you going to do when your rotation starts with SS and then lashing? When a summoner gets ported to the back, to the middle of the room, what are you going to do? You're going to have to run around, change, go all the way back there, hit them, do whatever you do. Or like, there's a lot of stuff that you're going to have to do. Me, because of the way I design my skills and my rotations, as long as I have like a mount available in, or even an arty, it doesn't really matter which. I don't have to find combat advantage position, man. I just turn around, throw a VP1, throw a Shadow Strike, put a mount down on him, let SOD do its thing, and the summoner's dead, and then I turn right back on the boss and off I go. Because I design my rotations around not only math, but game theory. You guys that use a pure math build and are going Shadow Strike Lashing Blade, what are you going to do in that situation? And that's just one example. I mean, there's so many bosses out there where I can come up with examples like that, where that rotation theoretically is a great rotation, the one you're talking about, but in reality, in practicality, it's not going to function anywhere near as good as a more flexible rotation. Okay? So let me get into math and game theory a little bit more, and I'm going to break it down into Vengeance's Pursuit, because I know you math guys out there despise the skill for some reason, and I want to explain how Vengeance Pursuit is actually greater than Lashing Blade when you apply math and game theory. Okay, so math versus game with Vengeance Pursuit. Let's bring this back down. Okay, so the worst math theorists go like this. Lashing is greater than VP because when you enter stealth, it gets that stealth bonus, and that stealth bonus makes it greater than VP. Okay, but it's not the whole story. Okay, now a better math theory is this. Lashing and VP are pretty close to being even, because while Lashing adds the stealth bonus, VP adds a second hit in the DPS cycle. I have VP1 and VP2. VP2 and Lashing, no bonuses included, are the exact same damage. Stealth adds, in Lashing's case, a damage bonus, but VP adds VP1. So it's possible, again, I'm not that super math tester guy who's going to go and test this thing out to the extreme. Lashing may still, in fact, be the stronger skill when executed from stealth. However, now we're going to apply some game theory to this, and we're going to show why VP is actually better than Lashing. I'm going to say, for argument's sake, that VP1 and VP2 is close enough to stealth Lashing hit that their damage is going to be pretty close to equal. Okay? However, now let's add some game theory. VP has faster cast times. VP has range flexibility. VP does not require me to waste time finding combat advantage position. VP1 doesn't break stealth. Okay? These are all highly usable, versatile things that help VP be better than Lashing. VP is my main SOD trigger skill. I trigger my SOD mostly from VP. SS is the other one. But the fact that I have two viable viable Shadow Demise initiators, and one of them is what, 5 seconds? Well, I guess if it's 2 seconds, it's 2 seconds faster, I think. One of them is 2 seconds faster. Means that in a longer fight, I can trigger more SODs. So me having VP then means that I can trigger more SODs, which means I generate more damage over the course of a fight. Even if Lashing itself does generate more damage as an individual skill, Lashing adds nothing. It adds nothing. It's a one-hit wonder that adds nothing. VP adds versatility, faster cast times, and SOD damage. And when you factor all that stuff in, all the game theory part of it, it's no question in my mind, VP is a more versatile and a better skill than Lashing. Now, I will say this. If you want the quote-unquote best ST build, and you're aiming for that, then the 3 skills you should use are SS, VP, and Lashing. I won't disagree with that. But Again, that will take a lot of versatility out for me. And I don't want to lose my versatility for such a small gain. Yes, VP versus Blitz is in fact a very small gain. I know that you math guys are going to argue otherwise. I know you're going to say, oh, it doesn't matter if it is. A gain's a gain. The math is the math. But I don't really agree with that concept, okay? It's not a big enough difference that it's going to matter that much. Especially when you add the versatility that VP provides me in that I can get more SODs over a fight than you. Then, and the versatility that Blitz adds in that when I blitz from stealth, not only does it give me, damage on and a way to provide some AoE, but it also reduces my CDs by 2 seconds. So when you factor all that game theory in, that's when you come to the conclusion that lashing is a garbage skill for the most part, that if used in a certain way, absolutely it can be used. I'm not saying that you should never use it. I'm saying that if you use it in a certain way, very specifically, it is absolutely one of your best skills. But you lose versatility in playing if you choose to use lashing, which in turn affects how consistent you can be with your DPS. It affects gameplay. It affects also entertainment value. It affects a lot of things. So that's math versus game, basically. You guys like to live in your math vacuum, and that's cool. And in your math vacuum, you may very well be right with all the things you're saying. I choose to live outside the vacuum, and I choose to develop my class using both math and game theory. And that's something I suggest you guys look at, because gaming is not as simple as skill X does A damage and skill X does Y damage, so therefore skill X is the best skill in the universe. And that's what it boils down to. So the gist of it is that my rotations are less prone to fail, and they are way more fun. I know that's subjective in my opinion, and I realize that you guys may define fun as being something totally different. But for me, the point to play a game is that we're here to have fun. Complete the dungeon, all that stuff. I'm a very serious player in that respect. But my goals are not simply to top pain giver charts and feeding my ego by using overblown skills like smoke bomb and movement speed. I'm here to tell you guys that just because you can top a pain giver chart because you can run ahead and use smoke bomb, it doesn't mean that you can do any kind of DPS on a boss when it's a totally different way. It's a way of adding pain giver charts, okay? You may, at the end of a dungeon, have just as much damage as I do, let's say. Let's say I'm running with a rogue who's a smoke bomber and a movement speed guy. And by the end of a dungeon, I got 100 million, he's got 100 million. But the thing is, like 60 to 70% of his damage comes from smoke bombing mobs. I'm the one who's killing the boss. And that's my goal. It's to kill the boss. It's not to win a pain giver chart because I can smoke bomb the hell out of mobs, okay? It doesn't really serve me it doesn't serve me any purpose to play that way. It really doesn't. I'm not that kind of guy who's going to yell at people because the dungeon takes 5 minutes longer. Like, I'm not that. I'm a serious player, but I'm not so seriously elite that I'm going to let it affect my enjoyment of the game. Okay? The bottom line is we're all here to enjoy the game. You may have different goals than I do, and that's cool, but I got to ask myself. I mean, I love math. I have a math degree. I love math, but turning the game into a battle of math takes the spirit and the fun out of the game, and I don't understand why people are so determined to make everything about max damage in a vacuum, a mathematical vacuum. This is how to play. When in fact, it's boring as hell to play that way. And I don't know, maybe you guys need to see a shrink because it seems to me like there's a lot going on in your life that are bigger issues than worrying about being an elitist gamer. That's the bottom line here. I just remember the game, remember the spirit of the game, and remember that it's about fun. And maybe you'll enjoy the game more, and maybe you'll even enjoy life more, guys. So at the end of the day, I think I'm done here. My video has been posted, my points have been posted. You know that even though I made a little assumption error earlier on, it doesn't change how I play the game. It doesn't change my rotations. It doesn't change any of the concepts, math versus game, and it doesn't change how I choose to play the game and why I play the game. I play it to have fun. I also do play it to maximize my character. Don't get me wrong. I do. I have a little bit of ego in me in that respect as well. And sometimes that comes out when I do get onto these YouTube videos and stuff. But I can separate my ego from the game. Some of you guys are ridiculous. I run a dungeon with, and they're yelling and screaming at everybody because God forbid, the tank is got the boss and it's like 5 degrees in the wrong direction or something, and they'll yell and scream. Like, you guys have some serious life issues you need to address, and I don't think the game is doing it for you, okay? And that's the conclusion of this video. And I hope it was informative. I hope it explains what was going on in my mind when I was on that YouTube video. I hope that you can not judge other people because they don't want to run your little perfect max build, and that in fact your max build may not in fact even be a great max build. It might be garbage, truthfully. In practical application of running it, it's great in a tutor. You go in your little tutorial thing and you run your little dungeon, and it's not even a dungeon. You're killing the boss in the little tutor world, and you're in a vacuum and all that stuff. I'm sure it's fantastic. But in practical real dungeons, it's not going to be as good as you want to make it out to be. And when I design my rotations, I do attempt to try and account for a little bit of leeway, a little bit of game theory, and a little bit of human error. And that's the bottom line, guys. I hope you enjoyed it, and good luck in your WK builds, and we'll see you in game.